Jesus Christ is one of the most influential men in all of history, the man whose life, teachings, and crucifixion are the basis for the morals of billions of people. But he died over 2 millennia ago, and with so many devoted to his principles, everything from the bathtub of baby Jesus to his cradle, footprints, milk teeth, blood, and such relics became important. But even among these, there was one relic, a shroud, believed to have been touched by Jesus during the resurrection. This Shroud of Turin, as it's called, is one of the most debated, mysterious, and controversial relics in human history, and it might just be the best clue we have about how Jesus actually looked like. A shroud is actually a piece of cloth in which a person is buried. In the Jewish way, as it was common in the time of Jesus, the body is wrapped up by a long cloth as far as the shoulders, and then the head is bound round with a napkin, tied by the 4 corners into a knot. The Shroud of Turin in particular is only a 4.3 by 1.2 meter linen cloth that bears the faint image of a man, front and back. The markings on the cloth are chillingly consistent with the wounds of crucifixion, with what appear to be bloodstains, lacerations, and even the outline of a crown of thorns. This outline led many to believe this to be the burial shroud of Jesus Christ himself, imprinted with his image in a miraculous event, while critics have their misgivings about the origin of the shroud, calling it a ploy of falsehood. But before we can talk about the validity of the shroud, we first need to go all the way back to when it was discovered. Its first documented appearance was in 1354, though some believe its history stretches back much further. One theory suggests that the shroud was secretly transported from Jerusalem to Constantinople during the early centuries of Christianity. This theory is supported by historical records that mention a holy shroud in Constantinople, which was looted during the Fourth Crusade in 1204. Another intriguing piece of the puzzle is the Prayer Codex, a medieval manuscript dating back to 1192. The manuscript contains an illustration of a burial shroud with markings eerily similar to those on the Shroud of Turin. Some believe this could be evidence that the shroud existed long before its official appearance in 1354. But coming back to the official version, the first record of the shroud was in 1354 when the cloth was discovered in medieval France. It was presented to the dean of the church in Lire in north-central France by a knight named Geoffrey de Charny, who claimed it was the shroud that was wrapped around Jesus after his crucifixion. Skipping ahead to 1453, the shroud found a new home with the House of Savoy, an Italian royal family. They moved it to a chapel in Chambéry, France, where it survived a fire in 1532, though not without damage. Eventually, the shroud was relocated to Turin, Italy in 1578, where it has remained ever since, housed in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist. Taking a closer look at the image, it shows a man lying straight, obviously naked, and has his hands crossed one over another. Some of the images or stains have been identified from the shroud as a broken nose, swollen face, bruised right eye, parts of beards plucked out, wounds from the crown of thorns, tearing wounds produced from the scourging bruises on shoulders due to carrying the weight of something heavy, allegedly the cross, knee injuries from repeated falls, nail wounds from Roman crucifixion, and an oval wound between the 5th and 6th ribs on the right side. These wounds are also known by the Bible, explaining the crucifixion of Christ. The bloodstains that remained on the shroud and survived millenniums were tested by a team from the Spanish Center of Syndenology in 2015, and were found to be type AB, which is one of the rarest blood types in the world. Now, some people claim to see images of flowers, coins, and even writing on the cloth, but these claims have been debunked by modern digital analysis. The faint images of such foreign material are likely the result of the texture of the fabric or the photographic process used to capture them. But that doesn't answer the mysteries that surround the Shroud of Turin. The credit for sparking this debate in recent times goes to an Italian photographer, Secondo Pia. In 1898, he took the first photographs of the shroud, and what he discovered shocked the world. And that was only possible because he took a photographic negative of the shroud. At first, it was just a shroud, nothing was on it, just a piece of clothing. But when Pia took that image, something changed. When viewed as a negative, the details of the man's face and body became strikingly clear. This discovery sparked a wave of scientific interest in the shroud, and the debate over its authenticity has raged ever since. This meant that Geoffroy de Charny, the knight who found it, was not lying. For a man's face to be imprinted on the shroud and for it to last for centuries despite the fire and accidents that befell it, that can only mean it is truly divine. It's really convincing, even if you are an unbeliever. This new discovery led to a series of analyses on the shroud, and in 1878, an international team of experts under the Shroud of Turin Research Project, STURP, examined the cloth. They concluded that the image was not a painting. There was no traces of pigment or dye, and they couldn't explain how the image was formed. In 1988, scientists used radiocarbon dating to determine the age of the shroud. The results announced that the cloth dated back to between 1260 and 1390 AD, long after the burial of Jesus. But the accuracy is often questioned, as textiles such as the shroud could have been contaminated from multiple exhibitions done in museums and churches for centuries, and this was way before our current advanced preserving techniques. As a result of this contamination, it could have produced a wrong reading from the carbon dating. This was the view held by Giulio Fanti, a professor at Italy's Padua University. But that didn't stop researchers. Researchers went as far as going into pollen analysis for answers. They discovered pollen grains on the shroud that are native to the region around Jerusalem, suggesting that the cloth could have originated in the Middle East. Even as recent as 2022, Italian scientist Liberato De Caro and his team used a different technique, wide-angle X-ray scattering, to analyze the shroud's linen fibers. Their findings suggested that the shroud could be as old as 2,000 years, placing it squarely in the time of Jesus. But it also concludes on the note that further study and analysis are required to verify the precise date of origin of the shroud. The foreign material rumored to be present went through their own analysis. A study published in 2011 by LaRusso and others subjected 2 photographs of the shroud to detailed modern digital image processing, one of them being a reproduction of the photographic negative taken by Giuseppe Inri in 1931, and they couldn't spot any foul play. The medieval manuscript of the Pre Codex also came under the microscope. Some of the assumed features of the drawing, including the 4 L-shaped holes on the coffin lid, have pointed some people towards a possible attempted representation of the linen cloth. As far as religious texts go, some mention the shroud, such as the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, which state that Joseph of Arimathea wrapped the body of Jesus in a linen shroud sinden and placed it in a new tomb. The Gospel of John says he used linen cloth, athonia. Some believe the Shroud of Turin could be that very cloth. After the resurrection, the Gospel of John states, Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. He saw the linen cloth lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. The Gospel of Luke states, Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb. Bending over, he saw the linen cloths lying by themselves. Some proponents for the authenticity of the Shroud of Turin have argued that the image on the shroud was created by some form of radiation emission at the moment of resurrection. If this is real, if this even remotely has a shred of truth to it, that changes everything. That means Jesus exists, and that also means everything said in the Bible was true. Unfortunately, not everyone believes this story, even among Christians. Even though they do believe in Jesus, they don't believe that cloth has anything to do with him. And when you look at the points they make, you'll start to see how easily it can all be a lie. To start with, skeptics argue that the illustration in the Prayer Codex that people keep referring to could simply be a representation of a common burial practice, not necessarily the Shroud of Turin itself. And to make matters worse, the knight, Geoffrey de Charny, who found the shroud and accredited it to Jesus, could be lying. You see, there's no record of where or how de Charny acquired the shroud. He showed up one day with a piece of clothing and said it belonged to Jesus. In 1389, one such critic, the Bishop of Troyes, Pierre de Arcis, denounced the shroud as a forgery. He claimed an artist had confessed to its forgery, and so the bishop wrote to Pope Clement VII to denounce it. Well, the Pope's response was to declare the shroud a man-made religious icon rather than a relic. The thing is, early Christian pilgrims to Jerusalem in the 4th century mentioned relics like the crown of thorns and the spear that pierced Jesus' side, but not a shroud. In the beginning of the 6th century, pilgrims to Jerusalem were shown the spear with which Jesus was stabbed, the crown of thorns, the reed and sponge of his passion, the chalice of the Last Supper, the tray on which John the Baptist's head was placed, the bed of the paralytic healed by Jesus, the stone on which the Lord left an imprint of his shoulder, and the stone where Our Lady sat to rest after dismounting from her donkey. But no shroud. It was not until the second half of the 6th century that pilgrims began to mention relics of Jesus' burial clothes in Jerusalem, albeit with various doubts as to where they had been preserved and what form they took. Now, that wouldn't be a problem in itself. The only problem was the systematic but often unverified discoveries of additional relics from the Holy Land, including the bathtub of baby Jesus, his cradle, nappy, footprints, foreskin, umbilical cord, milk teeth, the tail of the donkey on which he entered Jerusalem, the crockery from the Last Supper, the scourging pillar, his blood, the relics of the bodies of Jesus' grandparents and the 3 wise men, and even the milk of the Virgin Mary and her wedding ring. Take your pick. You get the gist. Apparently, buying holy water for $10 didn't just start. Stuff like this has been in existence for a long time. Which could also be what the knight who allegedly found the shroud did. Maybe not for money, but for status symbols. Countries have also fought to claim some of the glory that came with having such a shroud among its people. The movement of relics from Jerusalem that were bought, stolen, or forged reached its peak at the time of the Crusades. The Carolingian era, dawning at the beginning of the 9th century, was a time of intense traffic in relics. One legend, built up around Charlemagne himself, held that he made a journey to Jerusalem and obtained a shroud of Jesus. According to this legend, the cloth was then taken to the imperial city of Aachen, aka Aix-la-Chapelle, then perhaps to Compiègne, which obviously, again, counters the knight's story. The funny thing is that there are accounts of a shroud in both cities, and Aachen still holds this relic today. The coexistence of these relics in 2 important Carolingian religious centers has not prevented other cities from claiming to possess the same objects. So, which is which? How can 2 cities have the same shroud? Arles, Rome, and Cadouan all boast a shroud, and it was like that for a long time, until 1933, when the one in Katuan was revealed to be a medieval Islamic cloth. Carcassonne likewise makes this claim, even though this latter was found to be a piece of silk dating between 1220 and 1475. Plus, it doesn't help matters how the Christian sect for relics revolves around the desire to perpetuate the memory of illustrious figures and encourage religious devotion toward them. Initially limited to veneration of the bodies of martyrs that were involved with Jesus, over the centuries it extended to include the bodies of saints, and finally objects that had come into contact with them. As Christianity spread, the ancient custom of making pilgrimages to the burial place of saints was accompanied by the custom of transferring their relics, or parts of them, to the furthest corners of the Christian world. These transfers, called translations, had several effects. 1. They increased devotion towards the person from whom the relic derived. 2. They were believed to protect against war, natural disasters, disease, and to attract healings, conversions, miracles, and visions. 3. They heightened interest in the place hosting the relics, turning them into poles of attraction for pilgrims and enriching both the church and the city that housed them. 4. They increased the prestige of the owners of the relics. This could be where the knight falls into. That may explain why the Pope may have chosen to keep the shroud, despite it being rumored to be false. The Shroud of Turin isn't the only relic to have gone through such controversy. One of the other relics mentioned alongside the Shroud of Turin is the Spear of Destiny, and its authenticity has been debated as well. It is the name given to the weapon that is said to have pierced the side of Jesus Christ during his crucifixion. According to legend, the spear was believed to possess great power, and whoever held it would rule the world. It has been part of numerous historical claims, with some rulers like Napoleon and Adolf Hitler believing it gave them special power. Other items from the Last Supper have also been caught in the crossfire. The Holy Grail is the cup that Jesus is said to have used during the Last Supper. Many myths, legends, and stories, such as those in Arthurian lore, suggest the Grail has mythical powers, or is a key to hidden secrets. The exact nature and location of the Grail have been subjects of debate for centuries, with some claiming it is hidden in various places, or lost to history. The Turin Papyrus, or Book of the Dead, is one that shares the name. This ancient Egyptian papyrus, often attributed to a priest named Ani, is an important relic that deals with the afterlife and the journey through the underworld. Some theories suggest it contains hidden knowledge or instructions for achieving immortality, but the exact meanings are still debated by scholars. Even Santa Claus was not spared. The bones of Saint Nicholas, the historical figure behind the modern-day Santa Claus, are kept in Bari, Italy. The mystery surrounds the idea that his remains were secretly transported there from Myra, which is in modern-day Turkey. And some believe parts of his bones, or relics, possess miraculous powers. Remember how I said that a lot of people were seeing images of flowers or coins? Well, further analysis was done, and they did not find any images of flowers, coins, or writing, or any other additional objects on the shroud in either photograph. It also turns out that the faint images were only visible by incrementing the photographic contrast. They concluded that these signs might be linked to protuberances in the yarn, and possibly to the alteration and influence of the texture of the Henry photographic negative during its development in 1931. So by now, you start to see why not everyone believes this is the Shroud of Jesus Christ, even as a Christian. In conclusion, the mystery of the Shroud of Turin continues to captivate the imagination of both believers and skeptics alike, as it remains one of the most intriguing and debated relics in history. Whether you think of it as the authentic burial cloth of Jesus Christ or as a medieval artifact, it's safe to say that it is to date some of the best evidence we have for what Jesus looked like. And if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to watch this one about the advanced civilization that vanished.